Let's paint these trees. First, you're going to want to tape your watercolor paper down onto hardboard or a piece of cardboard. Then get your paper completely wet with a paper towel or a large paintbrush. You want it so that the paper is shiny. Then I'm going to grab some of my Payne's Gray with a lot of water mixed in so that it's really light and add it towards the top of my paper while it's still wet. Now we're going to move on to our trees, and these are going to be really light and faded in the background. So I'm using some of my sap green and a tiny bit of Payne's Gray, and it's mostly water with just a little pigment mixed in. If you have too much paint on there, you can dab it back with a paper towel. Make sure each layer is completely dry before moving on to the next. I like to use a hairdryer. Now you can see I'm grabbing some of my Payne's Gray and sap green with water. And this is going to be my back layer of trees, so I still want it to be pretty transparent. Now watch how I make this tree. I'm going to do a vertical line going down, and then while it's still wet, don't let it dry at all, I'm going to work my way down towards the bottom. Now the top branches are going to be really small, and I do these sort of horizontal scribbles back and forth. And then as I work my way down, I connect the branches so that there's no white showing, and it's going to be my base layer for the next group of trees. So watch closely on this one. I go down, and then I can use the tip of my brush for those little tiny top branches, and then I'm going to vary the brush strokes back and forth so that they look different. You can see I'm connecting at the bottom. You don't really need to worry about how good the paint looks on the connection because it's going to be layered with the next row. You can see my very back trees that are really blurry. There's a bit of a jump between the transparency, and so I'm just adding these ones right behind my darker trees so that there's more variation. Then I'm just filling in the base where they connect so that my next row of trees will have a nice base to work from. I dried that layer with a hairdryer, and now I'm moving on to my next row. And I'm trying to grab a little more paint for the amount of water on my tray so that it makes it darker. And as the trees come closer, they're getting a little bit bigger, and I'm adding a little more Payne's Gray to my mixture because that's really going to darken them up. This tree shows a good example on how I try to stagger the trees so that they don't feel like they're all in a line. And then as you work your way down the tree, I'm pushing a little harder with my brush to make the branches a little thicker and vary the shape. Don't be too concerned about each branch and shape of the tree. If you work quickly, you can get the paint to bleed and blend together for each row. After finishing this row of darker trees, I went back and added a little bit lighter tree right behind it just so there is less of a jump between each row. And then I filled in and connected the base. I got it with a hairdryer, and I'm ready for my next row. You can see my paint is getting thicker and thicker with pigment, and I'm pulling more of the Payne's Gray to make the trees even darker. I'll slow it down here so you can see my tree as I'm working my way closer to the front is getting darker, and I'm still connecting it as I work my way across the page so that I have a base for my next layer. Make sure you keep your brush loaded with paint. You want the paint to blend and bleed together, so that's why you want to keep it very wet and work quickly so that it all bleeds together and it's not drying out on your brush or on your paper. After this last tree on this layer, I'm going to connect the bottom so there's no more white, pull out the hairdryer, and I'm ready for my last row. My paint is super pigmented and thick at this point, and it's mostly Payne's Gray. And as I'm doing this front row of trees, I'm going to pretend like the paper doesn't end. I'm just going to work my way down. It's okay to paint over the tape, that's why it's there. I'm going to finish off this front row with some different sizes of trees. See how dark it is? And we're not worrying about the ground or the trunks, we're just going for the tops. And after you dry the last row with the hairdryer, you do the most satisfying part, the tape peel. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you give it a try, I'd love to see what you make.